Oh yeah, rock and roll. What a great song. It's a happy song. It's called Holiday by Weezer. And I hope you guys are looking forward to your holidays, which are coming up here very soon. You are almost there. Just one kind of final push over the next week, and your finals will be in the rearview mirror, and you will be hopefully relaxing and not worrying about these things anymore. But in the meantime, I thought maybe I could help you out by taking a look at a couple of the essay questions that might be on your U.S. history final exam for the semester and talking through just kind of a strategy for going about answering them. Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the questions I might ask you was, how revolutionary was the American Revolution? This question is good because it makes you think about the strategy of defining key terms when you address a question. An important part of the essay is that you demonstrate an understanding of the question. So here, to demonstrate that, you really do need to define what revolutionary means and also what the American Revolution was, because that's really going to determine how you answer the question. Okay? So often what I do when I'm looking for a definition is I go to the dictionary and I type in the word, and then I take a look at what comes up. Um, and I think about, there are a few things that were offered there. Um, what does a revolution mean? And you could define it in just a political sense, the overthrow of a government, replacing it with a new one. Or you could define it in a much larger sense, socially. And you can look at the one there, a dramatic and wide-ranging change, the way something works or is organized, or in people's ideas about it. So ideas maybe are an important part of the American Revolution. Anyways, whatever definition you choose there really is going to inform your answer. So when you think about your introduction to this question, you want to define what you think revolutionary means, and you also want to give a little bit of context about what the American Revolution was, when it happened. Are you going to focus on the decades leading up to the Declaration of Independence? Are you going to focus on that declaration and the war that followed? Are you going to focus on the creation of the Constitution and a new government model? Are you going to focus on all of that? You totally can, but it's up to you to decide what you choose to focus on or how you choose to introduce the American Revolution, again, is going to affect your answer for the question. So, excuse me, once you have an idea of what you think revolutionary means and what you think the American Revolution was, then you're going to consider the evidence, because this is really a to what extent question. So as Mr. Finch always loves with a to what extent question, you can create a T-chart and you can put evidence that falls on, kind of either side of the debate. For example, if you want to argue that the American Revolution was quite revolutionary or super revolutionary or more revolutionary than not, you might look at that left side and some of the evidence that is there, right? I can just talk about a couple of these things really quick, but politically, obviously, you have the formation of a new government. It's independent from Britain. It establishes a constitution that has separation of power, so hopefully no one branch will accumulate too much and abuse its power. Um, it's revolutionary in the respect that a democratic government is set up where really no democratic government existed before, or at least one that had the power to pass its own laws over those that were being passed in Britain. And a lot of people could vote in that government. Around 50% of the free male population, according to one estimate. Of course, on the other side, you're going to notice, but mister, what about Native Americans and women and indentured servants and slaves? One thing to keep in mind here is, in most countries in the world in the 18th century, those groups are not voting. Okay, so you need to have a little bit of historical perspective in mind. I'll get back to that in a moment. But anyway, you can see the rest of the stuff on the left-hand side. Are the ideas very important in this revolution? The Enlightenment principles of life, liberty, property, pursuit of happiness. Those things that John Locke wrote about and that Jefferson called the self-evident truths that all men are created equal. Okay, so anyway, you can take a look at that information on the left if you want to argue that it's revolutionary, and I think that any of those items, and it's not an all-inclusive list, you could add your own things to that as well, but any of those would be points that you could make in favor of the American Revolution being a big a big deal, a big change. Okay, if you want to argue that no, it actually didn't change all that much, look at that right hand side. And again, what you're going to notice over there is a lot of those reasons have more to do with social structure and social class. So if you are the kind of person who, when you think about history, you like thinking maybe less about political systems and governance and the kind of what we call great man history, that maybe it is an argument that's going to appeal to you. For example, you might say, well, really, the American Revolution created a new government, but it just removed the power from Britain and put it into the hands of the landholding, business, educated elite in the colonies. And maybe you want to argue that that's not such an enormous change. In fact, people in the anti-federalist kind of side of this debate would argue, really, all you're doing now is giving that power to somebody new who's going to levy their own new taxes and create an army and coin and borrow money and dictate our foreign trade, etc. So some people are skeptical of that. At any rate, other things you can think about are listed there. Okay, for example, that some of the founding fathers didn't really like the idea of extending democracy to all sectors of society. We've talked about why that is. They might be worried that impassioned people could lead to mob rule. And, did they have a point or not? You can think about that. Think about the French Revolution, the direction it went. Maybe they had a little bit of foreshadowing there a decade earlier. Anyway, look there at the very bottom. You can see a big argument is if you're a Native American, if you're a woman, and by the way, that's 50% of the population. Okay, if you're an indentured servant or a slave, and someone asks you this question, how revolutionary was the revolution? You're you're, you're probably going to be like, yo man, what revolution are you talking about? Because this ain't no revolution for me. Um, so anyway, you can look at those two sides and you got to strike a, sorry, you don't have to strike a balance, but you got to think about what you believe, okay? Um, do we require a mass social transition or upheaval in order to call something revolutionary? Or could it be a revolution of ideas, and is that important in the way that it inspired other later movements, such as the French Revolution really soon after? Or there's all sorts of examples throughout history you can think of. Anyway, once you consider that evidence, you got to balance it out. You got to create your argument. Sorry, I don't know why I keep saying that. You don't have to balance it out. If you want to argue really strongly for one side or the other, great. You're perfectly welcome to do that. But you got to kind of gather up your evidence that you want to use and make sure, hopefully, that you have an awareness, at least, of the other side if you're going to argue for kind of one as being more dominant, the other revolutionary versus not. Okay, and then you're going to execute your argument. So that's your body paragraphs, right? Lump those ideas together. Think about which evidence supports what you want to say. Okay? I'm going to move on to the next question now, and I'm going to do a little bit faster just to keep this somewhat manageable for you to listen to. This question says, discuss the contributing factors to and outcomes of westward expansion by the United States government and its citizens. And now, this is a different style of question, right? It's not a to what extent question. This question is more asking you to prove your knowledge and use it to create an argument. There is no argument inherent in this question for you to say, yes, kind of, or not really, or whatever. It says discuss. So first what you want to do is what is being discussed. Again, look in the question, see if you can identify the key terms. Westward expansion, that's pretty much the key. And what are we talking about? The westward expansion of the U.S. So provide a little bit of historical background, right? We're dealing predominantly here with the 19th century. And then think about the evidence that you want to use here. And there's a lot of it. Okay, there's a lot of it. And you can look, I've tried to make a list there again. I'm not going to take the time to walk through everything here, but what were the contributing factors to westward expansion? Political motivations, economic motivations, social conditions such as overpopulation, people seeking new opportunities, the idea of manifest destiny, simple curiosity, the freedom provided by the frontier, or maybe political agitation, on the part of business interests to move west. So you can think about all those contributing factors and you might want to consider which you find to be more important than others, perhaps. Yeah? And then on the other side, the outcomes, that's the other kind of side of this coin. Um, their outcomes are positive and their outcomes that are negative. So, exploration, mapping, scientific research, positive interaction between different social ethnic groups, trading for mutual benefit, exchanging ideas, but there are also negative interactions. For example, we saw this cycle of violence, and if you want to focus on the Native American experience and the interaction between the white settlers and Native Americans, that's an important part of this essay. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the history there is pretty sad. But you get to choose what you would like to focus on, right? Um, there were a lot of positive stories and opportunities for people who did move west. So, anyway, that kind of cost benefit analysis is something you need to think about and integrate into your argument because you got to create the argument. Okay? So, think again about which factors are maybe more important to you and which outcomes are maybe more significant to you, historically speaking. Because what you're going to do is you're going to take all that evidence there that you can list. And again, it's not comprehensive. You can add your own ideas here. What of that evidence do you want to use? Do you want to talk about? Because you can't talk about it all. You just don't have enough time. Okay? And I don't expect that. So, I don't know, maybe one strategy would be like you have your introduction that establishes the context, and then you have one big paragraph or maybe two paragraphs about what were the contributing factors. And then after you have one big paragraph or two other paragraphs about what were the outcomes, and then you want to conclude. That would be a good way of going about it. Or you could go thematically, right? And you could say there were economic factors that led to it, and there were economic outcomes, and that's a paragraph. There were political motivations that led to the settlement of the West, and there were political outcomes, and that's a paragraph of evidence. Okay, so hopefully this makes sense to you, as you got to think about the way in which you would like to structure it, and you got to go and you got to do it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Again, I really hope that this is helpful for you guys, and I hope that you are able to maybe, after watching this, maybe be able to organize your essay structure and think about what it is that you want to say for that part of the final exam. I'm out. Peace.